What's up, H-Town? Welcome to the Believe in Astros podcast, your home for all things Astros, with your hosts, sports writer Geoff Balke and Astros broadcaster and former third baseman Geoff Blum. Now, here's Balke and Blummer.
What is up, H-Town? Welcome to episode 19 of the Believe in Astros podcast on the Believe Podcasting Network. Most importantly, playoff day. Let's freaking go. I'm Geoff Balke, my partner, of course, broadcaster and former Astro, Geoff Blum. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, and of course, you can watch us on YouTube. Be sure to give us a follow at Believe in Astros, BLEAV in Astros. You can find me at Geoff Balke, and Blummer is at Blummer27. It is obviously going to be quite an exciting few days coming up. And before we dig in, just mention our sponsor. Football is back, and BetOnline remains your number one source for all your football betting needs this season. You'll find the latest odds, matchup info, player news, and game trends. And as your continued source for all sports wagering info, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, live scores, and giveaways all season long. Always the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports and events like Major League Baseball, MMA, tennis, boxing, even golf. Head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 100% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure you use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your rewards. BetOnline, where the game starts. Blummer, the game starts today. This is what we all wait for all season long. Are you as jacked up as I am about it?
Yeah, it's just unfortunate we have to wake up as early as we do to record podcasts and do interviews and get hyped up for this thing, and make sure we have all of our gear ready like you're talking about. It's crazy to me that the Astros continue to be that stepchild in the MLB consistently and have to have that 2:30 start like they do in Game 1, Game 2. But the fact that the Houston Astros are in the playoffs again just prove that they're dominant, and I'm sure the fans will show up because Minute Maid's going to be rocking. I think one of the benefits, and I don't know if it's been talked about, is the fact that it is in the afternoon gives the Astros the excuse, hey, it's too hot outside, we got to keep that roof closed, and when that roof is closed, that is one of the loudest ballparks in all of baseball. That's one bonus.
Oh, yeah. Businessman special. I will have to be doing a little bit of work today, but instead of sitting in my office, I'll be sitting in front of my TV with the laptop open, doing what I need to do that. Where are you planning on watching it today, out of curiosity? Are you going to be at the ballpark?
Well, I'm going down to the ballpark. I'm going to get done with this podcast. I'm going to do my other podcast, and then I got to head down there. And I'm just going to kind of linger around and get my credentials, do all the business type stuff, like you said. But at about what time is first pitch? 2:37. So I would imagine about at 2:35, TK and I will be on the microphone screaming "play ball" into that microphone to get this series going.
Nice, nice. Well, let me tell you something. 2:37. I always find it very specific. I'm like, is it 2:37 on the dot? Will we be 10 seconds late? 10 seconds early? Could it be? It's like, come on, man. I will say, and I mentioned this before we got on, I have some gear that I've gotten loaded up. I went there, just a little plug for a really cool place down called Space Montrose. It's this little shop right down on Westheimer and Dunleavy. They have cool Houston-centric type stuff, really cool, like artwork. So I picked up my Bregman candle, which I'm not probably going to light this if and until they reach the World Series, at which point it will have to stay lit, maybe 24/7. I've got my Verlander no-hitter sticker, which is obviously going to be critically important. And, of course, my coaster, my Minute Maid coaster, which...
Because you got to have a beverage.
You got to have a beverage, and I've got to have it something to rest on. So yeah, I've got my jersey that I wore all through every playoffs. I'm like ready. And I'll be honest. I know we talked about who we wanted to match up with, right?
Yeah.
Seattle makes me nervous though, and and I think for good reason. They have this sort of team of destiny kind of vibe. There's a lot of emotion behind them. 2 decades without a playoff appearance. how do you, if you're the Astros, like going into this, you're the team that everyone expects to win. You're the team that really probably should win, given everything else. How do you sort of combat that? That thing that Seattle, that sort of magic that they sort of seem to have going into this postseason.
I do think they're on a roll. They are playing very good baseball. The addition of Luis Castillo, and that's a guy you got to remember. Let's go back during the season and just kind of recap a little bit where the Astros are 12-7 against the Mariners. Mariners probably played the Astros the toughest other than the Oakland A's, but they've gone by the wayside amazingly.
Right.
But 12-7, only an 8-run differential between them during the course of the season. The Astros at I almost call it Safeco Field. Was it now AT&T something or other?
Whatever it is now.
Yeah, they were 5-4 up in Seattle with a negative 13-run differential, but at home 7-3 with a plus 21. So they play extremely well at home. The last time they played the Mariners was all the way back in July 31st. So there's been a pretty good amount of time between both teams. And they have the addition of Luis Castillo, but at the same time, the Astros have the addition of Lance McCullers Jr. So there's some interesting factors going into this. But I agree with you in this sense that the emotion is there for the Seattle Mariners because they haven't been there in 21 years. They've got the entire city revved up. They're actually selling out their ballpark for the first time literally in 21 years, which is kind of exciting to see. And they've actually put themselves in a position where they can kind of rock the boat a little bit. They finished 16 games behind the Houston Astros, but they only have to be one game better than the Astros in a 5-game series. So it should be pretty interesting. And you know as well as I do that familiarity breeds contempt. And I think there is a little bit of angst in the series and anxiety because they have faced each other so much and they know so much about each other.
Yeah, and you also think the Mariners are one of those teams that they're not above, throwing at a guy on occasion, like they're not above the intimidation factor. I mean, Scott Service is, a friend of mine messaged me before this and was like, my good friend Katya, who sent me a bunch of amazing stats. I'm going to talk a little bit about those. She's a huge lifelong Astros fan. Her last part was she just wrote parting shot. Scott Service is a jerk. So it's like, they're a feisty team. That's one of the things about them. And, the Astros are a pretty quiet, reserve team outside of a couple of guys, but you get the sense that the Astros have that sort of, they want to squash your dreams. They just might not talk about it as much, but they're the type of team that want, I always remember the Simpsons episode where Homer fought the Mike Tyson character, and the Mike Tyson character before it says, I'm going to make orphans of his children. And they said, well, they do have a mother. He goes, I assume she would die from grief. Like, I feel like that's kind of the way the Astros are a little bit. They want to, crush your dreams. They just kind of do it quietly. And I feel like that's some of the intensity they're going to have going into this. They're going to have to continue to carry that chip on their shoulder that they clearly carry. I feel like that's going to be an important thing for them. That's their emotion.
Yeah, and they've been doing it for years now. It was in 2017 when they were the underdog, when they actually won the World Series and knocked off the mighty Dodgers. So a lot of people, all of a sudden, they've got that that target on their back, and then obviously Rob Manfred put an extra target on their back with the situation he created. And these guys have been playing uphill the entire last 5-6 years, just because of that stigma that's carried with them, and they've carried it. I don't want to say grace, but they've carried it with a certain level of, we know you hate us, we don't care, we're going to go out and win ball games, and we're not going to throw it back in your face. We're just going to say that's what we were supposed to do. And I think that's kind of that workman mentality that the Astros have, is that we're better than you, we're going to play harder than you, we're going to prepare better than you, and when we beat you, we're not going to be surprised. We're just going to move on to the next opponent. And I think that's where you kind of get frustrated with the Astros if you're on the opposing side, because the Seattle Mariners are going to come in, we're going to knock the Astros off. They're going to get, hyped up about the whole situation. And then hopefully if everything goes in the Astros direction, which it should, they're going to be like, damn, they did it again,
Yeah, it is. They do seem like teams come in guns a-blazing, and the Astros just kind of they're Neo in the Matrix. They just put their hand up and all the bullets stop in the air, and that's got to be frustrating. If you look at these matchups though between these two teams, I mean, the Astros clearly have the advantage in starting pitching. The Astros have the advantage against virtually any team in baseball except maybe the Dodgers when it comes to starting pitching. The bullpen, though, is interesting. The Mariners have a pretty solid bullpen. They've got the one kid that throws like 100 miles an hour. But when you factor in the fact that also the Astros will be throwing some of their starters out of the bullpen as well, it kind of levels the playing field and makes these teams a pretty interesting and competitive. How do you see those matchups when it comes to once the starter gets taken out?
Well, the bullpen matchups, just against the Seattle Mariners on the season, the Astros have a 3.53 ERA. The opponent, the Seattle Mariners, had a 4.15 against the Astros this season. Those were the starters. The bullpen for the Astros actually had a 3.04 and actually held the Seattle Mariners to a 151 batting average.
Wow!
And I think that's what's fascinating to me, because as good as the Seattle Mariner bullpen was against the Astros this season, because it was the starters for the Mariners that actually got beat around a little bit. And you know as well as I do, when the Astros knock the starter out of the game, they usually have a lead, and their bullpen comes in, shuts the door. They don't have to score any more runs. It's basically how it's gone throughout the course of the season. But, the bullpen, I think, favors the Astros just in the sense of in what we saw in that I don't know why I keep wanting to say Baltimore, but in that Mariners-Blue Jays series is the fact that one of their most consistent guys in Sewald came in and just basically blew up, giving up 4 runs, I believe, in a third or 2/3 of an inning, hitting a guy. I mean, it was borderline out of control.
Right.
But you've got a veteran out there in Diego Castillo who's faced the Astros a ton in the postseason with the Tampa Bay Rays. In 6 games against the Astros in the postseason, 2 saves and a 1.23 ERA.
Wow.
And the guy you're talking about is Andres Munoz.
There you go.
Comes in blazing with 100 to 103 mile an hour fastball, and Service actually abused him in those first 2 games against the Blue Jays, throwing him 2 2/3, and he only gave up a hit and 0 earned runs. So I think that guy Munoz is kind of kind of jumped into the picture a little bit and been that go-to guy for Service. So it'll be interesting to see how he used the bullpen, because he's not afraid to go out there and abuse those guys.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you bring up and you talk about having runs, I think something that was brought to my attention through some of these stats I received and some of the looking I did is that really the Astros are phenomenal when they're ahead. When they're leading, but when they're behind, not so much. The stat that was really eye-popping, when they go into the 9th trailing, the Astros were 2-47 this year. They were 28th in baseball in runs in the 9th inning, whereas Seattle was 4th in baseball. Also, Seattle won more one-run games than any team in baseball this year.
Again,
they're good in those pressure situations. The Astros tend to roll over guys. Also, interestingly enough, the Astros very, very good in games when they do well in the first inning. When they're kind of a first-inning ball club. When they get out to a lead, it's difficult to stop them, frankly, once they get out to a lead. It's the games where they're really close down the stretch where things can get a little bit dicey. So I think what the Astros are going to have to do really offensively is they're going to have to step on these guys early. They're going to have to hit the gas early. I mean, we've got the Jose Altuve, one of the best leadoff home run hitters in baseball. So you've got to wonder, I feel like a lot of these games are going to be won and lost early, depending on what happens. I think we might see a couple of games where the Astros win by 3 or 4 runs just because they're able to get out to an early start.
No, I completely agree with you. I think it's going to be in those first 5 innings is where you see these games decided, especially if it's in the Astros' favor, because if they're able to get out there and get that early lead, we've seen them. What's interesting to me with the Astros is down the stretch, we obviously Altuve was on fire, Yordan Alvarez was on fire. But we've actually seen first innings where it's been a bunt and a blast for the Astros, where they're kind of playing a little bit of the small ball, and then they get the big tank that goes out of the ballpark, and all of a sudden the game's out of hand. Starting pitching comes in, does their thing, bullpen shuts it out. And I think they're going to have to carry that same idea. And the Astros, you've got to remember, 2nd in home runs, 2nd to last in strikeouts per game, and that is a lethal combination when you do have a team who's trying to fight to beat you, because they almost have to be perfect against your offense to go out there and win ball games. And if you're not, The Astros will take their walks. They'll take their base hit
Yes.
the other way. They'll move a guy over, take the sac fly in the first inning and put one run up. And then by the time they come through in that second time in the order, it's walk, base hit, blast. Oh, God, what just happened? We're down 4. And that's to your point where the bullpen comes in a little bit later and shuts this thing out.
Yeah, I think that there's so many interesting numbers when you look at the Astros in terms of how they get runs, because you don't think of the Astros as a manufacturing runs type of team, but they really kind of are. You know what I mean? They do hit the long ball, but they are a team that takes what's given to them. They will take walks. One of the things that I thought was interesting too is as a team defensively and pitching, when it comes to fly balls, they give up fewer home runs per fly balls than any team in baseball. So there's just so many little things that the Astros do that drive you bonkers. They're great defensively, which I think is going to be a key in this series. I think a lot of people don't talk about the importance of defense, but when you look at it, the Astros have huge defensive advantages at certain key positions. Certainly in the outfield, they have a huge advantage defensively. At shortstop, where Jeremy Pena is much better than Crawford, and frankly, behind the dish. I mean, they've got good hitting behind the dish, but we've got the 2 best defensive catchers in baseball. So I think when you put those things together, you really do add up to something that just makes the Astros naturally better. Doesn't mean they're going to win, no, but it definitely gives them advantages that the Mariners are going to have to battle against. And like you said, they have to be perfect, whereas the Astros probably can play without being perfect and still win games.
No, I think you're absolutely right in that sense. And that's what I was talking about, too. It's not just on the pitching side because, just take the game 1 starter, for instance, Logan Gilbert. He's got phenomenal stuff. He's young. He's energetic. He's got this, this mentality on the mound that I'm going to blow your doors off. But if he ramps up and gets overly excited and tries to throw 100 miles an hour every pitch and he starts to miss, I'm not talking big misses off the plate. I'm talking if he starts to nibble and those nibbles don't go his way, then all of a sudden he's 2-1, 3-1, 3-0, 3-2. Not only does that get your pitch count up, it forces you to throw a better pitch out over the plate because you're trying to throw a strike. And what happens with that is when the Astros get dialed in, all of a sudden they start to smash some of these mistakes. And then you start to frustrate, and maybe that emotion kind of tilts the other way. And a guy gets frustrated, and he becomes even more wild, not just out of the zone, but in the zone. And that's where I think that in the past, that's where the Astros have really frustrated very good pitching staffs in the postseason, is by not expanding and hitting their pitches and forcing that pitcher to throw them pitches they can hit.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm amazed by the Astros' discipline and their ability to just say, you know what, I'm not going to swing at a pitch that I can't hit, even if that means I might get struck out on it. I'm not going to expand my zone. I'm going to wait until you make a mistake. But more importantly than even that is when you do make a mistake, I'm going to crush it, right? They're going to barrel that ball up. I don't know how they do it, but it's really impressive.
It is, and I think some of the advantage, too, and what the Astros, I would imagine their mentality going into this game is see how many pitches they can put on that starting rotation for the Seattle Mariners.
100%.
Because if we just talked about Andres Munoz, we've talked about a Diego Castillo. What those guys are high leverage guys. They're not going to come in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th innings. I think if the Astros really have an opportunity, they beat up on that starter, put 3-4 runs on that starter, knock him out in the 4th or 5th inning, and then leave Scott Service trying to figure out how he's going to create a bridge to get to those guys or create an opportunity where you can keep the Astros offense where it's at and allow your team to come back. But I'm not sure they have those bridge guys in the middle that can go out there and do that.
Yeah, I wonder what he's going to do if he gets a guy that, gives up 3 or 4 runs, because you know how it is in the postseason. Everybody's got a short leash. But I kind of wonder if Service is going to be able to have a short leash. I mean, I don't know that he has. I mean, because you can't, like you said, you can't bring in your high leverage guys and take them out because especially with a team that does come back frequently like they do, he's got to try and hold on as best he can and hold on to those guys for when you need them late innings. I think one really interesting matchup in this, or I should say a pair of matchups against the Astros, are going to be Julio Rodriguez and Ty France. Ty France has crushed the Astros this year. He has driven the Astros bonkers But
that might be an understatement, man. That guy's unbelievable
against
the Astros.
But he's not been great since the All-Star game. Since the All-Star game, he's only hitting 229. He's basically gone kind of the opposite direction of where Rodriguez has gone, who's gotten better since the All-Star break. But both of those guys, to me, this is correct me if I'm wrong here, but it feels to me like the Mariners have a team that is top heavy offensively. They've got they've got some great hitters, some really quality at bats. But as you get down the lineup, you don't have quite you've got a couple of guys they have out with injury, a couple of guys that have been struggling a bit going down the stretch. They don't seem to have that sort of lineup where you can pitch around some of these guys a little bit. And I mean, you don't want to walk anybody, obviously, walks are to death now, but it does feel like they cannot give up, they don't have to groove pitches to guys. And I don't know, maybe that's me, but it does feel like they don't quite have the offensive power.
Well, here you go. Just for Ty France, for reference sake, because when the Astros play the Mariners, I think the one guy you're like, damn, that Ty France guy is up again. This season, or the last two seasons, 350, 958 OPS, 7 home runs, and 20 RBIs. So I think, to your point, what you're talking about is how do you pitch to these guys and not allow them the free pass? Because obviously, like you said, free passes in the postseason always seem to come back to haunt you.
Yeah, they do.
So you don't want to give guys opportunities later in that lineup, opportunities with guys on base, because if they do freak out, broken bat, blue hit, run score, you're frustrated. But I think that the Astros would be more than willing to give up that base hit the opposite way. Force him to swing his way on, but just let him get that base hit and move on, and force him to swing at some pitches.
Right.
J.P. Crawford's been a pain in the ass the last couple of years too.
He really has.
He's hitting 284, but he doesn't do it with damage. And I think what's interesting, I think he's hitting ninth. He'll just slap it the other way. He's not even trying. He's just like, dink, I'm going to get on base. I'm going to steal a bag. I'm going to get on for the guys, turn that lineup over, score some runs. That's where it's frustrating. So you got to be careful with some of those guys. But I agree with you that Julio Rodriguez is obviously a big key in this lineup. If he's not going, I don't think this lineup goes, and they get a little frustrated. Mitch Haniger. I think Mitch Haniger, you've got to keep your eye on him too, because he's got flashes of taking over a game, in the past. And if you take a nap on him, he's gonna do some damage. But Cal Raleigh's been on fire.
I was just about to say, Cal, what do they call him? Dump trucks or something? I
Big
forget.
Dumper.
Big.
Yeah, I guess that's better than Big Pooper, but Big Dumper, man. I mean, this guy.
The guy, look, he does have dumps like a truck. Let's be honest. But, yeah, that guy's and he's sort of an emotional guy. He's like a guy that really gives him like an emotional lift because he is
big at bats.
Yes, he has. He's got 27 home runs this year. He's not a great defensive catcher, but the guy hits. And so, yeah, they do have a few guys. To me, I'm so with you on the idea that you just don't want to give up the big hits to guys. Go ahead, let them get a single here or there. Let your defense let them put the ball on the ground. Let your defense play behind you.
Well, it's just one more note on Cal Raleigh. His last 11 games, he has a 12-11 OPS, so he's kind of been that thunderstick in the middle of their lineup. Hit that home run to put him into the playoffs. Hit that home run to beat the Blue Jays in the first game. But man, I forgot what I was going to say, unfortunately. But
it's all good.
Yeah. No. Oh, I was going to say this. In the playoffs, you want to force teams to get 3 and 4 hits per inning to beat you. Do you realize how hard that is against a pitching staff like the Astros? So it forces those guys to have better at bats, to put swings on pitches, but to get 4 hits in an inning to score 2 or more runs is really hard to do. And that's to your point about limiting that one big swing, is force these guys to go out there and get 3-4 hits to drive in runs. Right.
And the Astros are great at turning the double play. That should, that's definitely something that will help them. Just a quick note about this. I know there's been some guys that have been sick with the team. Have we heard anything about that? I know they were hesitant to release their starter for Game 2. What's going on with that?
Dude, I seriously hope it's some kind of postseason ploy or smoke and, some kind of camouflage for what they're actually trying to do and just kind of ambush the Mariners with their rotation and what they're able to do. I hope there's, it's been 5 days off for the Astros. Lance McCullers missed a couple of starts being sick. I don't know if it's running through the clubhouse. I hope it's run through the clubhouse, not currently running through the clubhouse.
That's the last thing you need is for a bunch of guys to be sick going into the postseason.
Yeah, and I don't know where that stands because this is not the ideal moment to falter with sickness just because of health reasons, stamina, fatigue, whatever it is. You really hope that these guys are all right. But I know that this training staff for the Astros is hyper aggressive in treating guys and making sure they're right. So I'm hoping it was just kind of like, hey, you know what? We were a little sick there, and we're going to manipulate our rotation a little bit or our roster accordingly. But I'm hoping it's just a storyline that goes by the wayside when this game starts today.
Agreed. So one quick other note about Julio Rodriguez, which I think is a really interesting one, is that he has been outstanding in the first and the ninth, but not particularly good in the second through the eighth. My friend again sent me these stats. In the first inning, his OPS is 1.278, and in the ninth, it's 1.076. But in the eighth in the second through the eighth, he ranges from about 596 to about 800. So not a guy that is hitting a ton in those middle innings. And I feel like the Astros live for the middle innings, right? I mean, they're good in the first, obviously, but they really live for those. They're one of those teams that's just consistently putting pressure on you. And the Mariners seem like one of those teams that really is just, which it seems to me almost an emotional thing, right? Huge energy out of the gate, huge energy as the game gets to the end. But if the Astros are going to beat this team, and I still think they will, to me one of the keys is that consistent pressure on the Mariners pitching. That consistent, just like you said, just get a run here, a run there. Eventually they're going to get a crooked inning somewhere, right? They're going to put up a crooked number somewhere, but you just feel like it's just that constant pressure, just constantly putting it on there, forcing them to keep trying to strain, and because they're going to expand their zone or try to against guys like Verlander, and it's probably not going to work out very well. So that to me is one of the real keys here. Is just that offensive pressure on those guys.
JV, it's going to be really interesting. JV's faced the Seattle Mariners 6 times this season. He did have that one blow-up game out there in Seattle where he gave up 6 runs.
Right.
But from that point on, I think he gave up 1 run in the next 4 starts.
Right.
Each start he gave up 1 run in those next 4. Right. He also had a 12 punch-out game.
Yep.
And the way he finished the season, that last outing he had where the slider looked absolutely blistering and abusive, if he's able to bring that slider back, that's a weapon that the Seattle Mariners, even as well as JV pitched, really didn't see at the peak. They just saw a good version of the slider, but they didn't see that bastard, down and away slider that he has now. And I think it could result in, like you said, if they start to expand or they start to panic just even a little bit, they're going to chase that heater that rushes through the zone at the top, and then all of a sudden they're going to have to try and compete with that slider down, and it could really create some issues with the swing and miss. And if they start to swing early and often and panic a little bit, it's going to be a high swing and miss night or afternoon for JV.
Yeah, I'm going to be real interested to see how Verlander comes out in the first inning. He's a guy that he tends to set the tone early. He doesn't mess around, and I feel like this we talk about the sort of emotional element for Seattle. That can be a bad thing too. Keeping your especially in baseball, keeping your emotions in check is pretty critical. I mean, Lord knows that maybe the least emotional guy you'll ever see, at least from the outside, was Craig Biggio. That guy, I mean, I don't think I've ever heard someone repeat the same quote over and over as much as him. And but he just got it. He just got it done when he was out there. And I feel like this Astros, that's this team. They're just like, listen, you're not going to hear us, saying crazy things. You're not going to see us doing crazy things. We're just going to go out there and pummel you quietly. And you said it earlier. all of a sudden you're like, everything is just going along. Next thing you know, you look up and you're down 3 or 4 runs, and it's all just been that consistent. So I feel like if the Astros are going to win the series, I think that's going to be what they need. Just that same demeanor, go into it workmanlike, as you said, and take it that way, and that take out the emotion. I take the emotion out of the equation.
Yeah, and you got to remember too, as much as we complain about some of these day games, the Astros have been phenomenal during day games. They've almost scored 5 runs a game during the day, and then trying to wake up early enough to face a Justin Verlander is really tough. But overall, the Astros pitching staff has a 2.35 ERA during those day games. So as awful as it is for us to try and get to a game at 237, the Astros don't mind showing up at that time.
I tell you that's a good point. Day games, and look, Minute Maid Park is typically full during day games. I don't know, people just people take the day. Look, and in Houston, let's be honest. How many bosses are really going to be like, "What are you doing?" Like, I'm going to Astros. Oh, okay.
They would applaud it.
There's plenty of people in this town who love that. All right, Blummer, you got a prediction for this one?
Yeah, I do think. Obviously, we're not just overly biased. We're believers, and the reason we're believers is because the pitching is so good, and if the pitching does what the pitching is supposed to do, I don't care what the offense is doing, because if the pitching is good enough and they continue to do what they've done against the Seattle Mariners, the Astros are going to win. If not in 3, I'm saying 4. I do think that, maybe that first game in Seattle, they get a little bit of a boost. But the only thing that worries me is when they go to Seattle is that the pitching for the Seattle Mariners, after you get past Logan Gilbert and Luis Castillo, then what? That's the biggest issue. So if you're able to take game 1, game 2, really squash the hopes and dreams. But if you get to Seattle, you lose one game, I get it, because of the emotional, the atmosphere, they're going to be energized. But at the same time, you're either facing Fromber or Lance McCullers Jr., so good luck with that, Seattle. But I think it's going to be the Astros in 4, if not 3. I think it's not going to get past game 4, because if it does, it's going to get back to Justin Verlander. And if you go 5 games, I think it always favors the home team, which is going to be the Astros. The big key for me is going to be, believe it or not, this sounds crazy, is going to be Kyle Tucker. Kyle Tucker did not. He got to his 30 home runs. He got his 100 and whatever RBIs, which is ridiculous. But he didn't finish as strong as I think he wanted to. And I think there's going to be a little extra with Kyle Tucker. I think he's going to be your ALDS MVP if it's not Justin Verlander for throwing 7 shutty with like 8 to 10 strikeouts. But keep an eye on Kyle Tucker for me. I think he's that wild card that might put the Astros over the top.
That's a really good point. I think it's hard. It's weird to say this, and I think I've said it on here before. You sometimes forget about Kyle Tucker. I don't know how you can forget about one of the best right fielders in baseball. I don't know how you can forget about the guy. But yet he's just like this guy that just shows up, and you're just like, oh right, Kyle Tucker, right? It's like, I forgot.
How about being on the other team? You're sitting there going, okay, Altuve, Pena, Alvarez, Bregman. Whew, okay. Oh, damn, I left that curveball up, and it's in the second deck in right field. And you're going, who the hell hit that? And you're like, damn it, it's that guy again, Kyle Tucker.
It's Kyle Tucker. That's a really good point. I think, to me, I feel like for me the key in this series is going to be Jose Altuve. I think because he has such an ability to set a tone early. He's great in the postseason. He's got 23 postseason home runs or whatever it is. He's the
second most all time in Major League Baseball history.
He has
a chance to beat Manny Ramirez this year.
Unbelievable. He loves hitting in Seattle. When he has hit there, he's just a guy. I feel like he's a guy that can just set the tone early. He's also the leader on this team. He keeps these guys together
100%.
And one of my big worries if I'm Seattle is that Seattle relies so heavily on their rookie to not just set the tone emotionally, but to get hits and, to play defense. The Astros have a great rookie themselves, but they don't rely on Jeremy Pena. They don't need him to be great for them to be great. And I think the Mariners need Julio Rodriguez to be great for them to be great.
Excellent point.
And I think that's what we're going to see. I'm picking them in 4 as well. I honestly think the key game for them could be Game 2 when they've got Castillo on the mound. That's a game
that's their ace. You're right.
Yeah, you could see them shut down in, the Astros maybe in Game 2, but I also feel like the Astros are just not going to go to Seattle and be affected. I think if they're affected in any way by that crowd, it's going to be the reverse. I think they're going to just it's going to be that hate us thing, I just hope someone blows up a trash can and throws that on the field. I would love that. Just bring back the inflatable trash cans. Somebody hold up a sign with a buzzer. I dare them to say something to Jose Altuve. Truly.
Yeah,
I really do.
Because that just takes that fuel tank from about halfway to full in a heartbeat.
It's just he's the wrong guy. It's like messing with Michael Jordan. Just don't leave him alone. Be nice to him, or at least for me. But yeah, I'm totally with you. So Blummer, you're gonna be saying play ball today. Is that what I understand?
Yeah, me and TK get to be the play ball kids today.
Are you gonna do it in a high voice, or are you gonna just stick with your tenor?
I'm going to do the same thing I do throughout every game that I broadcast with Todd Callis. I'm going to follow his lead.
That seems like a smart move. All right, well, thanks everybody for joining us. We will be back towards the end of this week to talk about what has happened already in the ALDS. Hopefully by that point we'll be coming up on a Game 3 and getting out our brooms. We will find out. Lots more to come this postseason. Remember that go visit Bet Online, our sponsor. Obviously, we want you to join us in these. Send us your questions. Give us a follow. Drop a comment. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube. And obviously, fans, look, enjoy this postseason. This is the golden era of Astros baseball. This is perhaps the best team that the Astros have fielded in the last 6 seasons. It doesn't mean they're going to win at all, but it certainly means you should be out there watching them. If you've got to work today, I feel for you. Get the broadcast on. Listen to it on the radio. Sparks and Robert Ford will, I'm sure, be fantastic as always. But if you can get in front of a TV, turn that thing on, and if you can get to the ballpark, get down there, wear orange, and yell. The more the merrier. And enjoy it. And we will be back later this week. Obviously, go Astros.